Well, thanks. Thank you, Matthew. And let me just begin by saying thank you to your team, Army MadSci, Ian times two, Rachel, Lisa, Lee Groves. You guys do a great job and do really cool stuff for our Army. And so really grateful for that. It's an honor to be here. If anything, it's it's really essential. It's like we're all friends. There's like a big network here, and it's a really cool thing to like just catch up with so many different people that are here visiting. That there's too many to name actually. You just got to get into it. So what I did that was smart was I became the moderator so that the real talent can tell you what's going on. And so there's a lot of, you see the logos up there. We're representing two big entities. Just to explain for those that might be familiar, we have, as Matthew said, NATO SHAPE that's in Mons, Belgium, and some of us are there. And then we have US UCOM in Stuttgart, and some of us are there. And then we have and then we have someone from Fight Club representing Fight Club from the UK. But let me just quickly introduce what we're going to do is we're going to catch things up. Like the robot sent me a message during the break. He's like, be succinct, be concise, and like Roger. Too bad your owner didn't. I'm just kidding. But all right, so here we go. So to my left, start with Major Brian Housley. He's in the U.S. National Mission or Military Representative, USNMR office. That's connected to the Joint Staff at SHAPE. He spent time in the 82nd, 2nd French Regiment. And where I discovered him is at the 2nd Cavalry Regiment, where I'm not going to steal his answer, this thunder. He's going to talk about some cool stuff they did with Wargaming. And then to his left, in the middle there, is Rich Millington, leader of this amazing organization called Fight Club International. And he had some time in his past working at BBC, doing documentaries, and he's going to discuss some of the cool initiatives that are happening in Fight Club. And then finally, Lieutenant Colonel Josh Conant, Strategic Intelligence Officer at US UCOM. He's the president of the Wargaming Federation and a leader in the U.S. Army esports. Again, tremendous talent. They're going to take 5 to 7 minutes each, give you a blast of stuff that they're doing. Hopefully it's enough to trigger some good questions. And then we're here for another couple hours where we get on a plane to Brussels, where we can hopefully engage these guys and talk to them more about what they're doing, because it's really exciting stuff. I think we're at the cusp of like the future here. It's here now, and we're starting to introduce all the stuff the last panel talked about, artificial intelligence. We're just breaking glass and going for it. And so definitely engage these guys with what exactly they're doing. But here we go. Over to you.
Hey, thanks, sir. Happy to be here with this audience. What I will say up front is that I'm not a gamer, I'm not a hobbyist. I really don't have any experience in gaming outside of what I'm going to talk about here in a second. But I think the perspective that I can offer today is from the field and the operations perspective, and the value that the tools that we'll talk about today can bring at the tactical echelon to a unit that has a need. And I think any brigade combat team in the Army can use these types of tools and find value in them, even in combat. So as Colonel David said, I served most recently before moving up to SHAPE this past summer in the 2nd Cavalry Regiment, Vilseck, Germany. And that is one of the Army's 2 forward deployed brigade combat teams in Europe, permanently deployed to Europe. And so there's a very specific use case for the 2nd Cavalry Regiment, which is to deploy east and then to deter and, if necessary, defeat Russian aggression, right? But as you can imagine, that use case is going to be facing overmatch. Red is going to outnumber blue by a huge portion. So we were looking for ways to find an asymmetric advantage. And one of those was a digital wargaming tool that we brought into the regimental staff and down to the squadron staffs, which I'm going to talk about a little bit today. The brand name was LG Raid by Stillman. I don't think that's particularly important. There's other tools, some of which have been talked about here today, that can fill some of the same functions. But I think the fact that a digital, high-fidelity digital wargaming tool available at the tactical edge is the value that we saw and that I'd like to leave with. So, in traditional wargaming and the military decision-making process, first of all, the wargame is the first step of any activity that gets canceled when you're crunched for time and you're tired, right? And usually the outcome of the wargame, maybe it takes 90 minutes or 2 hours in the back of the tent, everybody's tired. The outcome is you get one additional phase line and one additional target, and you brief your commander, you high fives, and you go on and publish the order. All right, but you're not deriving high fidelity data that can inform the commander or mitigate risk, in my experience. So what LG Ray provided to us was a digital tool that had a physics engine, very high fidelity, produced a ton of data that was easy to interact with. And because it was cloud-based, as some of the other folks have talked about, we could run it in the field. We could run it while we were mobile using high bandwidth connection to the internet. The instance that we used was unclassified. It had The ingredients, if you will, were a blue Orbat, a red Orbat, high fidelity terrain data, and then the engine itself. All right, you combine that with the staff, and those were the ingredients that brought together. So real quickly, the main advantages that we saw and that I'd offer for you today was time savings on some of the fundamentals of staff work. So intelligence preparation to battlefield, your combined overlay with that high fidelity terrain data, the tool can basically provide your combined overlay near instantaneously. And, it checks when the S2 looks at it, it checks out with reality for as-use approach, restricted, unrestricted training, etc. It also has a powerful task organization tool that allows you to quickly retask organize inside the program that you're going to use to simulate or wargame, and then to export that to other tools to publish an order, which we found extremely helpful. The biggest advantages for the commander, it helped myself as the S3 and the commander synchronize the fight with high fidelity data, right? I can say with high confidence that the lead echelon is going to reach this phase line no earlier than this time, for example, and that the artillery has to be in place no later than this time in order to synchronize our effects. Now, we can get to those answers with traditional gaming or with a sync mat. The level of fidelity, I would argue, is not high, and the process takes a lot of people, and you usually have to be together at the same place in a vehicle or at a tent, which increases your risk. And so our ability to synchronize went way up using this tool. And then maybe most importantly, we can identify risks that are not obvious using traditional wargaming methods or analog playing products. Types of risks that we identified, outrunning our magazine depth. So this tool can tell you, based on when your sensors acquire, when you're in different types of contact, hey, when are fire missions going in? When are you running out of 155 artillery, for example? When are you running out of anti-tank shots, as another example? And that was extremely helpful to plan for our logistics and sustainment. The commander can tell you his evaluation criteria or her evaluation criteria, and you can speak directly to those. For example, I can see attrition over time. I can see vehicle kills. I can see, when are we running out of fuel? And I can speak to my commander in terms of the evaluation criteria that they provided with very high level of granularity, which the commander always appreciates. This tool interacted with our common operating picture, which was run on a Palantir platform. MSS is what the COCOMs are now using. And this tool interacts with that. So you can pull your live cop. Where am I today? I don't have to go in with a puckster. I can pull live cop data, plug it into the simulation tool, run the next 24 or 48, provide that feedback. And then I can drag those results back into my cop tool to share out with the unit. One of the most valuable tools was overlaying and comparing forces of action. So we can run, run heavy on the left or heavy on the right, bring them onto a single pane and show them in different colors. And you can see the differences in the data outputs. Hey, your attrition was X if you went left and Y if you went right. And then you can tinker with it to kind of A/B test your way to a better outcome. The tool's scalable. So a squadron staff could execute their portion of the plan. The regiment could aggregate squadron results. The division could aggregate brigade results all the way up to the theater level. And it was affordable to BBS. So in one instance, we gained a scenario, we exported that to BBS tabletop simulators. Our actual crews that would execute the decisive operation rehearsed on BBS next to their strikers in the motor pool. And then those crews went out into the field and they executed, and the feedback that they gave was very helpful in refining the plan. And you kind of got free, unlimited rehearsals. I think that's a good overview. I want to save some time for the others, and happy to take questions once we're all through. Thanks.
One more thing I want to highlight that they did was, while they were moving in Saber Strike, one of their Shutdown Native, they were interoperable with the Panzer Battalion and the Spanish Mega Battalion. So they immediately are breaking glass in terms of interoperability to get our allies and partners involved. So seeing our allies here, sir, having the Koreans here, this is great. How do we do that more often? At the tactical edge. And they did that. And they made a lot of G6s and CIOs uncomfortable, but we need to do that before we get to war. So over to Rich.
That's great, thank you. So my name is Richard Millington. I'm a civilian. I'm with Flight Club International. My background is I'm a recreational wargamer. Professionally speaking, I worked in media communications, specifically science communication. Ironically, I hate public speaking, so please bear with me, and we'll just get through it together. So the point of concept or the overall model is about creating maximum engagement across the civilian space, across the wider defense sector, and within the military, and to basically bring as many people together as possible with as diverse a skill set as possible and work onto these wargaming problems. How do we develop games? How do we develop systems? How do we best utilize them? How do we work different problem sets? How do we do that together in a very open and free and flexible environment? And what we get out of it. So that's the fundamental concept. Our overall kind of approach, I guess, is based around sort of two things. The first one is liberation from all the various stovepipes that we end up finding ourselves in when we work for various different organizations. Because Fight Club operates in an unsecured space, we don't do anything secret, we don't do anything that involves anything too confidential or sensitive. Everyone can just leave the environment that they're working in and mingle freely in a very sort of free-flowing flat hierarchy, which is very good when rank and experience doesn't necessarily become a barrier to open constructive interactions. The second element of it is mobilization. It's a framework that we can use to actually mobilize the wider civilian space. Now, whether that's the core group of civilian wargaming enthusiasts who have skills and interests that they may wish to contribute, or a wider range of the specific skill sets that we can get within the civilian domain. So in my personal case, like I said, working with communications, do video media, produce different media resources, Fight Club, working community management, community building. I get to take that burden of lots of our more specialist members who can then go on and work up interesting games, interesting tactical plans, and everything else. So as a framework to actually go out into the wider industry and the wider civil society, you find the talent and bring them in and have them start contributing to work these problem sets. It's so far proved to be a very, very good system. And as Arnell said, just get it started. So one example of this, and some of you may have seen this yesterday when we had the games night, is Operation Parry. I think, that video in the middle, that's our little introduction cinematic to that. What this is, I'll talk a little bit about it and how it kind of fits in with kind of combat and command use case, is a scenario that was made in Combat Mission Professional Edition, which is quite an old piece of software, but still one that's very functional, very useful, and it has a lot of real dedicated following throughout the civilian and defense spaces. In Combat Mission, we produced a scenario based around interoperability, or an interoperability challenge within the NATO enhanced forward presence in Estonia. So the overall narrative of this scenario is that you have this strange mixed composite battle group that's been thrown together at the last minute, consisting of a primary maneuver element, which is an Estonian mechanized infantry platoon, and they're supported with recon and maneuver support, which is drawn from British units. So there is a lot of the training that currently goes on in Estonia all the time with data different NATO allies working with the Estonians, trying to figure out, okay, how do we work together? How do we fight together? How do we learn and understand the procedures and processes of our partners so we can be more effective on the battlefield? Now, obviously, you can go out and do that in the field. It's interesting, but also expensive and time-consuming. We can offer through products like this, a range of resources that can be used easily and cheaply to pre-breed, pre-trial, pre-experiment, and get a better return and more efficiency when those field exercises actually do happen. So conceptually, this is nothing new. I think this is why wargaming analysis exists. What's different here is that we were able to pull in a range of different people from different backgrounds to produce this thing. The overall scenario itself was created by Staff Sergeant Richard Thurb, who's senior NCO, combat veteran, massive combat mission fanatic, and so on. He put together the scenario, created the map, did all of this stuff. I came in with graphics. And we had other people who provided feedback and other assets as well. So what we have now is a resource that we can kind of take out to the rest of UCOM to make it be.
Yes, you talked to me.
Yeah, low battery.
Yeah.
I did. Oh, there we go. High level on this one as well. I didn't know I was talking for so long. Sorry. Where was I? Yeah. So anyway, so we have a product there that we can kind of put into a competent command. That's an example of the kind of thing we can produce. Many more things that we've done, many more things in the pipeline. So I'll move along and maybe have with you later on.
Yeah, very good stuff.
Hello, my name is Josh. We're currently working at UCOM in the J2, integrating a lot of intel activities with operations. One of the things I wanted to just kind of go over today are ways that we can challenge and improve and push a lot of the wargamings and where it's going. I think the first thing looking at is how we do planning. When we have these tomes of plans that are like multiple inches thick, how do you wargame a plan that has 50 pages for the scheme of maneuver? Like, getting down and scripting it is really kind of an exercise in futility. So understanding the mission command, understanding what are those key tasks and purpose, what are those key terrain, key end states for the adversary terrain and time. So how do we get our planning process to facilitate wargaming going forward? The other one is kind of going into the low volume wargaming fallacy, right? Like when you only do a wargame 1 or 2 times or a single digit wargaming, you're not really doing a wargaming. You're doing a rock drill with a little bit of red teaming, which is fine. But when we tell people we've wargamed this and this was the best outcome, we're misrepresenting the capabilities and where we're at in the futures. When we talk about the different capabilities that exist with LG Rig, a great demo the other day, talking about 10,000 iterations of, hey, if I adjust the variables of force availability, munitions flow, national restrictions based on towed forces, all these different variables, adjusting them, running the models, going forward 10,000, 100,000, saying, well, if you have low munitions flow, you can still be successful if you have less national restrictions, perhaps, or if you're more aggressive early based on the adversary force flow, munitions, whatever. Those are the types of models that we really need to start pushing. When you have that model built in a system, a program, software, that really then changes the paradigm of how wargamings and exercises go. Right now, we kind of get together, go through a handful of days of iterations, which are good rock drills, good red teaming, but we really should be pushing out the models, the teams, the staffs, and integrating that into battle rhythm events. So your J3 battle rhythm event should be inputting what your constraints are, what your thoughts are, and updating the model. These staff functions, these B2C2WGs that inform it, should be informing the model that you're going to then run the wargaming. So we're not creating a whole other wargaming line of effort. We're taking wargaming and applying it to the current workflow of different commands. There's another interesting thing in wargaming. It's like the uncanny valley of wargaming. You'll be doing different things, and someone will say, "Well, that's not exactly how you do it, and that's not exactly how you do this." And that's fine. We need to build models that get away from that and start teaching the big skills that you need to take away from it. And so I play on the U.S. Army Warhammer 40K team. I'm the general manager of the U.S. national team and the president of the U.S. Wargaming Federation. So wargaming is super fun. And one of the big things that we try and communicate to everyone is the echeloning of the game, right? So if you're not familiar with Warhammer 40K, it's a 28 millimeter sci-fi, pretty awesome game. It just cracks. Just be careful of getting into it. But you have the strategic level. There's 26 different factions. Understanding what the pros and cons of those different factions, And typically tournaments are played at 2,000 points. So how do you build the army to deal with those factions? What's the adversary capabilities? What do I need to be able to do? The operational level. What tournament are you going to? What terrain? What is the meta? What are the current capable armies that you need to be able to face? So you're starting to tailor into maybe a more mech army if there's less terrain, or maybe more infantry army if there's a light terrain, and really starting to adjust that. And then you have that tactical employment. So you get to the game, you're at the table, you set up, you know exactly what your opponent is, you know exactly what your terrain is, and you now have your specific missions. Now you need to execute. You have a 3-hour game, there's 5 moves each player gets, and now you have to achieve the most points based on that scenario mission. So you're getting really real-time feedback of, did my strategic understanding of what I was going to face, was that correct? Did I prepare and array my forces correct based on the terrain and what I was generally going to have to face on the battlefield? And then was I able to execute that in a manner that was consistent with kind of where I was going and what I thought I could deliver? And then 40K is just an amazing hobby aspect too. So if you haven't painted or put some of those models together, that is just a very satisfying aspect of it. The last thing I'll say is bringing game theory into national decision making, right? So at UCOM, one of the big things we pushed was national equilibrium and understanding when decisions that might not be best for the U.S. right now may be best for the U.S. in future moves, right? So you have different capabilities that we could do, pretty exquisite capabilities. Like, yeah, we could totally rock this and be awesome. But we don't want to start with that, right? We want to start with something that is maybe not a hammer and a nail, maybe not DoD related. And so it may feel to the military leaders as an initial loss, or like, hey, we had this advantage in going there, but breaking out that national equilibrium of, yes, you had the advantage, that was the best outcome for you. That was actually the worst outcome for the adversary, right? And so now you have opened this terrible futures of options that you really don't want to go down. But if you concede or go for a tie, which is very not American, and kind of bring out these other opportunities, you can have national policy and goals and objectives. You can meet those for the U.S. while also identifying off-ramps for adversaries and bringing that together. So showing that national equilibrium of, hey, sir, here's kind of that decision calculus, here are those opportunities. Those are a couple of things.
All right, thank you guys. Let me summarize for the crowd. So things that we'd like you to take away. So just leading with Josh, working with him in a special project we have right now, I know that his gaming experience and what he does translates into his professional. He has mental agility, he comes with great ideas. So I know that that's a takeaway, is that the fact that he's gaming all the time and doing stuff, it translates into what he does on a normal day job. Just like E.A. Sullivan said in his article, helping think like a Red Fort commander. For Rich, he didn't talk about it, but if you engage him or ask a question about, we did a StatX too. We use StatX as a stat exercise. Kevin was talking about it. We're about security's fine. We're under attack all the time by China and Russia on our site, but we do vet and we do control. It's locked down on Discord what we're doing. But what I'll say is that one of the StatXs brought together the Philippine Marines, Canadians, Australians. Like, we're bringing together all these partners and allies to fight on the weekend, going through a massive stack exercise in which the products are really good. I mean, I'm stealing all the time. Like, ooh, that's a good way to do a matrix and taking stuff. But they're doing that with our partners and allies on their spare time. They're just having fun and they're learning how to fight together. So it's a really incredible thing that Rich, as he came to the club, really took us to the next level with gaming. He's just too humble to say it, but he really has brought us to another level in the club. And then finally with Brian here, what they did with that simulation and AI technology in contact with our allies and partners, and the demo we just saw on Monday with Palantir, it's freaking phenomenal. And this is what I'm going to lead with, is that this is a call to action for those. Like, we right now in the operating force do not have the luxury to like play the games we want to play. We have to play the games we need to play, and we have to embrace technology. We have to embrace the tech and the AI right now, because we do have information and intelligence. Like, our allies, our adversaries, the strategic competitors are working very hard to do this to us, to create an advantage that we do not want them to have. And therefore, we have to all, across the community, all of society, figure this out. And I'm not just talking about the fighting stuff. I'm talking about cognitive maneuver. I got friends that work in that space, protection of civilian, populations. We have games for all kinds of stuff. And so please, join the Fight Club. It's free. You won't regret it. And then finally, I'll leave it there. Let's go ahead and get some questions. Okay, here we go.
All right. Good.
Yep.
All right. Hey, Lieutenant Colonel Dow from 91st Tank Sports Division. So my question, I think, is primarily for Brian. So awesome stuff. So using a constructive tool in support of co-analysis, freaking phenomenal. I've only seen that a few times. I know Cushman from Fifth Corps, Lieutenant Colonel Cushman, has something similar, using that with the plugin with CPCE at Fifth Corps level. It's not as good as LG Ray, development from the ground up, but it's a little different. But that's phenomenal. My question, and this is gonna, I'm gonna throw something in the beehive, so I apologize. But so I personally wouldn't call that wargaming, and this is what I want to get your thoughts on. So that is using a constructive tool in support of co-analysis. And one of my personal chagrins with the Army is calling co-analysis wargaming. And when we say I'm going to wargame something, because wargame isn't a verb, it's an event, right? That relies in the human domain where humans are making decisions. And that's important because during the co-analysis, if I conduct a wargame during co-analysis, the point is to illuminate where the commander's decision points are. And to do that, I have to have if and then reactions. Blue does this, red does this, and wait. Okay, I'm at a point now I need to make a decision. Because of that, I need an NAI. So now I need a collection asset. And that is where I start to synchronize my collection assets with my fire support execution matrix and my synchronization matrix and all those other products. That's what comes out of the co-analysis. But I have to do that by conducting a war game during co-analysis. When I am short on time and I don't have time to do that deliberate process and conduct a war game, then I can use a constructive tool like LG Rate or something like that to do some analysis and pump out some metrics and see the feasibility and the viability of my plan, right? I guess I want to get your thoughts on that, and I guess from the group too, because going back to Mr. Hodges' comments yesterday, we don't have a component for wargaming. This is where we talk about stuff because that is incredibly powerful, and everybody at every echelon needs that. And I know some of my brothers when Strategy first came out, and LG Rave was on their on their employment. And this is back in the early 2000s, right? It was the coolest thing, and they were able to do analysis like on their traps in Iraq, and it was awesome. So big fan of it. I just think we need to be very careful on how we talk about it with senior leaders and define it.
Yeah, so
It's point well taken, but I guess what I would come back with is if we slow down the pace of an LD RAID simulation to the point where the commander faces a decision, right? I don't think that there is a functional difference between the S2 moving the icon and the freeze reaction versus allowing the physics engine to run through that. And then you can go beyond the decision point. You can rewind to before the decision point. You can really drill in. You can see at that decision point on axis 1, what's actually occurring on 2, 3, and 4. So I don't think that the format precludes the type of decision point focused outcomes that you're describing. I think it's another way to achieve the same thing. If you have the time, if you have the right people in the room to facilitate it. I don't necessarily agree that it's an either or distinction. I think the tool is capable of facilitating it more in a traditional sense. Whether you label it wargaming or constructed environment, I'm agnostic to that. I think the result for both identifying decision points, but then also deriving a ton of data. You can A/B test your decisions in 1000x time and provide some context to the commander in greater detail than I have found possible with analog wargaming in a traditional NDFP sense, if that gets to your point.
One other thing too, when we talk about how we do this at scale and who the proponent is, when I was a young lieutenant going through IOBC, like there is a certain absolute value in sitting down and going through the deliberate planning process and writing it out with S8. Oh, that's great. As we look at going into wargaming, we need to put that into a digital ontology, so it can all, we can aggregate, we can run it back and forth, and we can try and fail with our different plans and how that goes. So the schoolhouses really need to do it, and really the maneuver center, because that's what we're going to teach our young future commanders on how they're going to do it. So if that a maneuver center of excellence doesn't integrate, hey, here's how you do the planning process on paper, and then now at the staff level, here's how we integrate it with this common framework to put it into a system in which we now can easily facilitate that in a wargaming and not have, well, I have this piece of paper that is my war. You can't wargame a piece of paper, right? But if we can integrate that so it's a digital content, then we can get there.
That worked out? Okay. I'm Jack Gaines. My card says Joint Staff J25, but I'm putting that in my pocket because I'm just speaking for myself at this moment. One of the things I do on the outside is I'm a showrunner for a thing called the MadSci podcast. We bring in strategists who are both in the outside world as well as the military to discuss the current environment, competition and adversaries and their operations below armed conflict. And one of the key things that I find is that we need to develop strategic thinking within the military at a lower level. And one way we can do that is through war games that include the economic, political, social structures, so that as they're thinking about how to shape the environment in preparation for battle, they know how to use cyber, they know how to collapse an economic system, they know how to work against political subversion, or even work with CIA to enact political subversion through, ghost governments or black governments. But if we can consider the aspects that shape the environment up to the conflict, we would be better at responding to the current threats that are going on now, which is why we're seeing the issues in Central Africa and in Georgia, because our adversaries are winning before we even pull out a tank. So thank you. Something to think about.
Good. Yeah, that's a really, really interesting point, especially as we move more into this MDO paradigm where not every domain will function in the same way over the course of a conflict. So, I have a little bit of a background in information operations. That's obviously a shaping capability. So if you want to represent that properly, you want to have a shaping phase in the beginning of any exercise. So we're currently drawing up a narrative with some Fight Club members in the Filipino Marine Corps. This is based around a conflict in the Spratly Island chain. And of course, what we've had in that region for years now is this strange, murky grey zone shaping operation of island building and Coast Guard cutters ramming fishing boats and jamming and everything in between. So we're creating a scenario that models that in at the start in this early shaping phase, also has influence operations modeled in during this early shaping phase, civil affairs issues, cyber attacks. And we are building and timing this around, real world events such as the 2028 presidential elections in the United States and also in the Philippines. So by constructing these large narratives that span the entirety of these conflicts, you can indeed start to factor in a lot of these different domains and a lot of these components in higher resolution. And really, really get into that shaping element, which is critical and absolutely fascinating. So that's more info on that soon.
Yeah, we'll see. One or two or something.
Thanks. Great panel. My name is Tom Spar. I'm the chair of intelligence at the Army War College, and just a recently retired Army military intelligence colonel. So my question is really for Brian, but Josh, I think you may be able to chime in on this as well. You concerned me when you said, we just throw it in there and it spits out the McCoo, right? To me, the best part of the most important part of planning is the process, right? Learning the plan, learning the terrain, studying the terrain. kind of got at that, Josh, a little bit in that maybe they're not mutually exclusive. You can do both. So kind of the second question I had, you comment on that. My second question is, it sounds too good to be true, right? What were the growing pains, the process of bringing this into the staff that you had to go through to get to the point where it was that fluid and you could execute it?
Hey, sir, that's a really good question. To your first point, I would say I do not see this as a substitute for analog and traditional MDMP. I actually think the Army is very good at teaching the basics with fundamental tools like land navigation, compass, map, protractor, and then building up to add technology to make us better at it, like adding GPS in that example. What I'd respond to your comment about the McCoo is during a CTC rotation, we fought without a main command post. So we had the entire staff was 22 personnel plus the commander and sergeant major. And so the reason we did that was to survive in a distributed command post environment. And so I agree with the point that you're making about learning that occurs as you generate the McCoo. But I may be fighting without an S2, and I may have literally no time or mechanism to create it other than to hit go. And the product that I would get out of that would not give me the same insights, but it would be better than no product at all. And so that is kind of my bet. As to your second question about integration, the most challenging part was understanding how do we collect the traditional staff outputs of the steps of MDMP and feed them into a tool like this in a way that's not disruptive to getting value out of those outputs. It doesn't add more time to the process, and it feeds a tool like this in a way that produces the results that I was describing earlier. I kind of agree, too good to be true. When we saw this, we pretty quickly saw the value in it. And that's part of the reason why I'm here today. And outside of this forum, we've tried to share this and work closely with some vendors to plug it into systems of record, programs of record, like Palantir. But I really do believe what the company said, that it's the future. I think the Army needs to spend more time and energy thinking about how tools like this integrate into our processes, not just at the tactical echelon with some vignettes like I'm providing, but in a more institutional way. So I think there's some room for that, sir.
That's
Hey, this was a great panel, and the thing that I found really interesting and useful about it is you'll talk about wargaming an awful lot, but we really don't get to it down to the tactical edge. So I sincerely appreciate it, what you all talked about. And I think there's sort of an interesting thread between all three of what you discussed, and that is that you're using wargaming or whatever we want to call that, right? That's an interesting argument we ought to have over here, but you're using it to not only inform, but you're using it on the fly in an operation. You're in an exercise. I think I have a lot of questions. Like, number one, how is red being replicated? Is it giving you the right answer? Because the answer, when you worried me a little bit when you said, I might not have the S2 to give you the insight, it's better than nothing. I don't know. If the algorithm has red right, maybe, but that can certainly be. But the cool thread comes down to actually the other two presentations what Fight Club can offer. And I'm embarrassed to say I'm not a member, so I'll sign up. But and actually what Josh talked about in terms of other gaming, and that's how you can use gaming to get ready for that event. And so putting it all together can be a really interesting approach. And maybe that's something the Army doesn't do enough. I'm thinking of the power of what Brian showed, right? Like as they're running through their warfighter. But then I'm wondering what would have been really cool if they actually did game it out with the thinking red adversary sort of beforehand, right? To really get the insight. Because what I've noticed in wargaming, I tried to get at some of that in the piece that I wrote from the Blue perspective. Blue never has time to think about warfare. That's really a shame, and right? I mean, they just don't, because you got a million things going on. So how do you guys put it all together? That's my question to you, right? And you might not even be able to answer it, but I think you're on to some
something pretty unique. Three of these individuals together to talk about the things that they're looking at. Because again, when I play Red, I've fought these battles 100 times more than any general officer. Right? I've thought about it more than they have. And that's probably not good. Right? So I need you guys to do the same thing at that tactical level. But how do we get there? And I think Fight Club and some of the work that you're doing with gaming in general might be the answer. So I just ask your thoughts on this. I'll shut up. Sorry.
All right, we'll each get like a quick
2 minutes.
1 minute, 30 seconds each. So one thing we're doing at Shape is we do have a red cell now, and they are doing the red thinking, and Fight Club's trading red cell too, and therefore we're back to the future where we really have to understand and just live that. So it's great, Wayne. Thank you.
Yeah, so just very quickly, I don't actually trust the simulations engine to adjudicate combat. The last 100 meters or direct fire range and in, I trust us to fight and win there. What I do trust it for is to give me when are all of those pieces in place to affect that outcome. And I think we can derive a ton of value. Are the sensors in the right place? Are the shooters in the right place? Do we have the fuel to get where we need to go on that avenue of approach? And then just real quickly, so there's 3 modes. You can do player versus player in the blinds, double blind, right? To your point about how do you fight, right? You do player versus AI, right? Or you can just let the AI run it all, red and blue, based on its doctrines and its engine, and kick out those very fast results. You can speed the time scale to 1000x or 1-to-1 real time. And so I think there's ways to mitigate some of those concerns, but they're well taken.
Yeah, I think what you're driving at is that we have this incredible profusion of talent and technology within our society. And furthermore, this is our primary asymmetric advantage, I would suggest. It's the one thing that we can kind of maintain a lead on. And other things, can't necessarily guarantee that. So how do we bring all this stuff together? Well, the first thing you do is somewhat self-motivated. You create the environment in which you can actually have these conversations and produce these systems and these structures. So, that's what Fight Club is for. If you try and do it within X number of bureaucracies or organizations, it's going to be a really, really hard job. If you can just bring people together in an environment that has sufficient structure but not too much, then you can start to get interesting outcomes. The challenge then becomes, how do you feed that back into the defense sector? You need people who can function as adapters that can kind of take this stuff, run with it, and then work it into their own kind of secured operational frameworks. And that's critical. We have to deliver that value back into the sector if we're going to draw from it. So my answer to that question is you create the environment first, and you fill it with people who think this is cool and enjoy it and want to play an active role in defending their society, culture, and nations. And one of the wonderful things about wargaming is that it's fun, it's exciting, and it's engaging, and it gives us a wonderful talent pool to draw from right off the bat.
Yeah, a challenge on one aspect. I do think the generals are thinking of this. So having been the special assistant to General Foley and General Walters doing the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the most recent one, it's the challenge is the staff does not have time.
That's
right.
It's more fair.
And so we have generals that have amazing insight, amazing instincts of where they want to go, and we're kind of stuck in this process like hell. Where we need to have all of these annexes, appendixes, it goes to go through all these shops, but we're so focused on the process, we're forgetting about the products, and we're not delivering what the boss wants us to do. And when you see the commander interact with the staff, that's like usually the crux of the frustration, right? And so how do we get a process that's more refined, more quick, more expedite, that really facilitates the staff to think, and for the staff to catch up with the commander, and that's the challenge. So when we talk about how do we get this in, it's got to start at maneuver centers, right? For our maneuver commanders to understand this, for it to be in their DNA of, yes, when I'm out in the field, I need to be able to operate with pen and paper and radio. But when I'm on a staff, I need to be able to move the information at the speed of what is available to then free up the staff to sit and think. how many, so in UCOM we call them B2C2WGs. I don't even know what it stands for, but it's like meetings and bug sets, right? So how many times do we sit around and those just become 06 and GO approval of the slides? There's no actual working that gets done. It's not a working group. It's an approval process. And that's what we got to get rid of. And that's, I think, what we need to address.
Great answer. It's good.
So, yeah, okay.